The snow fell softly outside the old brick building, each flake catching the warm glow of the street lamps like tiny stars dancing in the winter air. Sarah sat on the cold concrete steps, her bare feet tucked beneath her long coat, watching the world transform into something magical. The city had grown quiet under winter's blanket, and even the usual sounds of traffic seemed muffled and distant. She pulled her phone from her pocket and stared at the dark screen. No messages, no missed calls. The silence felt heavier than the snow that continued to pile up on the sidewalk in front of her. It was Christmas Eve, and she was completely alone. Sarah had moved to the city 6 months ago for a job that promised everything she thought she wanted. A fresh start, independence, the chance to prove she could make it on her own. But somewhere between the long hours at the office and the small apartment that never quite felt like home, she had forgotten to build the connections that made a place feel real. The cold seeped through her coat, but she didn't want to go back inside to her empty apartment. At least out here, she could pretend she was part of something larger. She could watch the occasional person hurry past, bundled in scarves and winter coats, rushing toward warm homes and waiting families. A small figure emerged from the swirling snow, moving slowly down the sidewalk. Sarah blinked, thinking her eyes might be playing tricks on her in the dim light. But as the figure drew closer, she could see it was a little girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old, wearing a bright red coat that stood out like a beacon against the white snow. The child walked with purpose, her small boots leaving perfect prints in the fresh powder. She carried something in her hands, holding it carefully against her chest. Sarah felt a flutter of concern. Where were this child's parents? It was nearly midnight on Christmas Eve, and the snow was falling harder now. "Hey there," Sarah called out softly, not wanting to frighten the little girl. "Are you okay?" The child stopped and looked up at Sarah with bright, curious eyes. She seemed completely unafraid, as if wandering alone in a snowstorm was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm looking for someone who needs this," the little girl said, holding up what appeared to be a small, glowing object. Sarah stood up slowly, brushing the snow from her coat. "What is it?" "It's a Christmas light," the child replied matter-of-factly. "But not the kind you put on trees. This one is special. It finds people who have forgotten how to see the magic." Despite her concern about the child being alone, Sarah found herself drawn into the conversation. There was something about the little girl's calm confidence that felt both mysterious and comforting. "Magic," the child nodded seriously. "The magic that's always there, but sometimes people lose sight of it when they're feeling sad or lonely." She looked directly at Sarah. "Like you." Sarah felt her breath catch. How could this child possibly know how she was feeling? "I'm not really lonely," she said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "I'm just taking a break. Getting some fresh air." The little girl smiled, a knowing expression that seemed far too wise for someone so young. "It's okay to be lonely. Everyone feels that way sometimes. But the magic is still there, even when you can't see it." She held out the glowing object, and Sarah could see now that it wasn't a traditional Christmas light at all. It looked like a small crystal, warm and pulsing with a gentle, golden light that seemed to come from within. "This is for you." "I can't take that," Sarah protested. "It belongs to you." "No," the child said patiently. "It belongs to whoever needs it most. And right now, that's you." She pressed the warm crystal into Sarah's palm. "Hold it close, and remember to look for the magic." The moment the crystal touched her skin, Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. It was like a door opening, or a light being switched on in a room that had been dark for too long. She looked up to ask the child what was happening, but the little girl was already walking away, her red coat disappearing into the swirling snow. "Wait," Sarah called after her. "What's your name? Where are you going?" But the child had vanished as suddenly as she had appeared, leaving only small footprints in the snow that were already being covered by fresh flakes. Sarah looked down at the crystal in her hand. It continued to glow with that warm, golden light, and she could feel heat radiating from it despite the cold night air. She closed her fingers around it and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. As she stood there on the snowy steps, still trying to process what had just happened, she heard footsteps approaching. This time, it was an elderly man walking a small dog. He was bundled in a thick coat and scarf, but his face was kind and his eyes twinkled with warmth. "Quite a night for a walk," he said, stopping near the steps. His little dog wagged its tail and looked up at Sarah expectantly. "Yes," Sarah replied, surprised by how natural it felt to respond. "It's beautiful, though, peaceful." The man nodded. "My wife always said that snow made the world look like a clean slate. A chance to start fresh." He paused, studying Sarah's face. You know, my daughter and I are having a small Christmas gathering tomorrow. Nothing fancy, just coffee and homemade cookies. You'd be welcome to join us if you'd like. Sarah felt the crystal pulse warm in her hand. A week ago, she would have politely declined such an invitation from a stranger. She would have made an excuse and retreated to her apartment, convincing herself that she preferred to be alone. But now, looking at this kind man and his friendly little dog, she felt that door in her chest opening wider. I'd like that very much, she heard herself say. Thank you. The man smiled, the expression lighting up his entire face. Wonderful. I'm Robert, by the way. I live in the building just across the street. Number 42. I'm Sarah. I'll see you tomorrow, Robert. As Robert and his dog continued their walk, Sarah realized she was smiling too. The crystal in her hand seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, warm and reassuring. She looked up at the falling snow, watching the flakes dance in the lamplight, and for the first time in months, the city didn't feel cold and unwelcoming. It felt full of possibility. She thought about the little girl in the red coat and her words about magic being everywhere, even when people couldn't see it. Maybe magic wasn't about supernatural events or impossible things. Maybe it was about small moments of connection. Maybe it was about strangers who invited you for coffee on Christmas morning. Maybe it was about the courage to say yes when someone offered you kindness. Sarah climbed the steps to her building, her bare feet no longer bothered by the cold. Tomorrow, she would have somewhere to go. Someone to talk to. A chance to be part of something larger than her own loneliness. She would bring something homemade to share, maybe ask Robert about his wife, learn about his life and his daughter. As she reached her door, she turned back to look at the snowy street one more time. The little girl's footprints had been completely covered by fresh snow, as if she had never been there at all. But the crystal in Sarah's hand continued to glow, proof that the encounter had been real. Sarah unlocked her door and stepped inside, but her apartment no longer felt empty. It felt like the beginning of something new. She placed the crystal on her windowsill, where its gentle light reflected off the glass and danced with the falling snow outside. Magic, she thought, wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you chose to see. Something you chose to believe in. Something you chose to share with others. And tomorrow, on Christmas morning, she would wake up with somewhere to go and someone to share the day with. The snow continued to fall outside her window, blanketing the city in quiet beauty. And somewhere in that snowy night, a little girl in a red coat continued her journey, carrying light to those who needed it most, one glowing crystal at a time.